let me just share with you some evaluations that I made, going through starting practice and investing and looking at the world of wealth and passive income and all those things. And let me just share with you some of the 12 wealth strategies for chiropractors that I've learned. And these are the 12 strategies that I found to be the easiest and fastest way to create passive income and wealth. So remember, the number one reason people do not become wealthy is lack of discipline. It's not income. It's not income. And then freedom lifestyle. Remember, a freedom lifestyle is when your passive income exceeds your fixed expenses. So remember, you've got to make an unbelievable amount of money to have it in the bank to give you an interest rate. I use the example all the time. Let's say that you wanted to make a passive income of $100,000 a year to be able to cover all your expenses, for you to live comfortably and all that. Well, you'd have to make $8 million at a 50% overhead to have $4 million, at a 50% taxes to have $2 million. And then you'd have to have a 5% interest rate. And you can't even get a 5% interest rate right now conservatively. In other words, making sure you don't lose your money. Right now it's about 2.5%, which means the amount of money that you would actually have to make would have been doubled. So it wouldn't have been 8 million, it'd been 16 million. And these are just a lot of the realities that I came across as I was practicing and investing and creating wealth. And so you'd have to make $16 million. Now, to have a $50,000 passive income, it'd be $8 million. And that's why, and I'm talking about standard investments in the stock market. And that's why 97% of the doctors can't retire at the same lifestyle. But all you have to do is have to have a passive income that exceeds fixed expenses. So you don't need to make $8 million or $16 million. All you have to have is passive income that exceeds your fixed expenses. So obviously the first goal is to control your fixed expenses. Well, that's very difficult at the beginning when you start practicing, because everybody goes out and buys the big house and, 2 SUVs and all the, what I call taxable depreciating liabilities with monthly payments. That statement right there is the number one reason why people do not accumulate wealth. It's not income. And by the way, it's the opposite when you learn to push your income into tax deductible appreciating assets. That's when you become wealthy. So most Americans are taught to do the opposite. That's the American way. And that's why a lot of times you can make a 6-figure income and 10, 20 years from now not be able to retire or even work part-time. So let's go into these. Number one is patient retention. I've just found that the patient retention, that's the quickest, fastest way to increase your income, is to increase your skill set. And I routinely have doctors increase their practice over $100,000 in 90 days just with patient retention, learning how to be a better communicator. We see it all the time when I do breakdown analysis of patient education. But that is the single best skill set, the fastest, the most money you can make. And then, of course, educational sales with the new patient marketing. That's a skill set. That's not just something you can sit in a seminar and know. You have to know that at an unconscious competence level. And the great news is that's what creates a lot of business. That's what gets the 92%. And as an example, a client joined a while back, not doing very well. Immediately he did our educational sales new patient presentation. And he not only got everybody, he did this twice, which is very unusual. He got not only everybody in the audience as a patient, he actually got more that weren't there, because he had 3 or 4 people not only sign themselves up, they signed their spouses up. And the only way that happens is with educational sales. And of course, that doctor increased his business over $500,000 his first year with me. And now he has his first associate doctor working on as a second associate doctor. And so he's in a straight line to wealth and freedom and freedom. So the third one is management, human resources. I found that gets to be a big problem after doctors are pretty good at knowing how to get patients and keep them. That becomes a limiting factor. There's a lot of doctors that have just tremendous problems with staffing, hiring, training, keeping, managing staff. And that becomes their limiting factor. As a matter of fact, I've had doctors who knew how to run the business, but they could never get over the human resource part to leverage. In other words, you've got to be able to leverage off the things that you need to do. You can't just do them all, because if that's the case, then you always have to be there full time. There's one doctor in particular I was thinking about, very successful practice, very knowledgeable, has a lot of skill. He just could not leverage off. He just couldn't, mentally put his head around getting, staff and associate doctors to where they do the work and not him. He just couldn't do it. It was unbelievable. It was just a real block. Well, he's got to work the rest of his life now because of that. So, and I always talk about personal injury attorney educational sales. That's a skill set. It's a tremendous skill set. Remember, that's the single greatest skill set in marketing you can know as a chiropractor. Creates the most amount of business for the effort. It's tremendous. I mean, we just did 7 presentations last year and signed up over 100 attorneys. That was easily worth over $10 or $15 million in referrals. So that is, again, these are all skill sets. You can't buy these things. It comes from within. You actually have to work on yourself. And a lot of people just don't see that. They're not willing to do it, and they haven't been raised that way. They've been raised that it's always something else that will take them to the promised land. I'm fortunate that my father always embedded in us that it was up to us to do it. And so, I'm huge into personal responsibility because I was raised that way. But I found some doctors just don't get it. They always think it's something else that's gonna get them wealthy instead of their knowledge and skill. So hiring and training associate doctors, that is a skill. I mean, you have to have the systems, but you still have to have the skill. And of course, we teach all this, but you do have to know how to hire and train associate doctors. There's steps involved. There's management involved. And, these people are educated. They're not like a high school educated staff member. So they have their own thought process. They, and how they do things. They're not just going to fall in line and just say what you do, do what you tell them to do. Again, we're talking about increasing your personal skill set. Number 6 there says, buy your own home, don't rent. That overcomes lack of discipline. Remember, lack of discipline is the number one reason people don't become wealthy. So, it's always sad when I have chiropractors come join my program and they've been in practice 20 years or more and they can't retire. They have no associate doctors. They don't have enough money in the bank. They can't even work part-time and maintain the quality of life. Well, there's no way that you should have to work. And, unfortunately, a lot of times they don't even own their own office. They've been paying rent for 20 years. And that whole property would have been theirs if they'd have just bought their own property and paid themselves for 20 years. And that easily gets to be $250,000 to $500,000 just from, and that's not from spending any money differently. I mean, you've spent the money anyway. So now buying your own home is important, more so for the new guys coming out of school, because a lot of times they can't buy their own home because of credit issues and money issues and all that stuff. So knowing how to buy real estate becomes important. But that now equity goes into your. By the way, that's also why typically when people die, that's the only equity they have is in their house. because it was forced equity from lack of discipline. So again, buy your house, don't rent, overcomes lack of discipline. And again, we cover the strategies of how to do that, go into owner financing and all that. We talk about fully funding your retirement account. It won't happen if you have to cut the check yourself. You know, I've been through all this. That it has to be an automated withdrawal. You got to set up an automated withdrawal or it won't happen. And the reason that's so important is that's the highest fee you're going to pay is taxes. So you can get 100% tax-free and it's automated. So hiring a trainer, we talked about hiring and train associate doctors. It's the easiest source of passive income. It's the easiest source of passive income. It's amazing. You know, I guess the realization hit me one day when I lost $250,000 in the stock market in one day. And, you know, it was like a bump on the head because we're just trained. Culture and society has just trained us to do some things, you know. And one of them is, you know, put money in your retirement account, put your retirement account in stocks and bonds and mutual funds. And so, you know, I went and did that route, and I'm like, lost $250,000 in one day, and I'm like, what am I doing? I'm sending money to somebody, a financial advisor, that he's sending money to essentially mutual funds, which are multiple businesses, that he doesn't know anything about, and he can't control. And I don't know anything about, and I can't control. And I thought, how crazy is this? I'm sending money to things that I don't know nothing about and I can't control. When I can control things, well, the thing that you should know the most about, the business you should know the most about of anything in life is your chiropractic business. That's where you should know more about that than anything. And then I thought, well, you know, why don't I replicate it? You know, and by the way, it took several people to kind of also point back at me to get me to that realization. And especially when I lost $250,000, then I'm like, what am I doing? So you're already there. You're already in your office. You don't have to spend any extra time. Essentially, you're already there. You should already know all the information. It should be the easiest form of money you make. As the associate doctor is knowing how to hire, train associate doctors. And remember, I say this all the time. It only takes 13 visits a week at a $50 visit to break even. Most guys think, oh, I don't want to hire an associate doctor. I can't afford to pay somebody $80,000 or $100,000 a year. Well, you don't have to. I mean, that way of thinking is thinking like that they're not going to produce anything. Well, that's not real bright. Well, we teach them immediately educational sales in the first 30 days, where they can do an educational sales presentation and get business. And then we give them 30 days to know patient retention. And you only need 13 visits. Remember, when they hit 13 visits, there's no more money out of your pocket. 13 visits to cover their base salary. And typically, you're only talking about 1 or 2 months of paying. Matter of fact, we had a doctor just bring on as associate doctor, and by the end of the 4th week, the associate doctor's 4th week, he was seeing 40 plus visits a week. 40 plus visits a week. His 4th week. In other words, he'd already gone into profit. Now, the money hadn't come back yet. You're billing it and you're bringing it back. And then some of the money has come back through copays and prepays and all that. But it washes out pretty quick. The production shot way over the fee. So the 2nd week in practice, the guy broke even. That's amazing. You can't do that with investments. You can't invest in a stock market, put $100,000 in, and get $100,000 back in 2 weeks. It's amazing. That's how powerful that is from a money standpoint. So again, number 10 is buy real estate in your retirement account. It doesn't have to be in your retirement account, but the great thing about your retirement account is that it's 100% tax-free. So, and then we go to asset protection. You don't want any assets in your name. We talk about how to use trusts. And then the tax-deductible lifestyle. It's the largest single expense. And again, I'm not talking about handing your books over to an accountant. That's easy. It's very easy to take your books, your ledger, and deduct it. You know, an eighth grade kid can do that. I'm talking about after they hand it back to you, and now they give you your earned income statement. And then you got to pay 52% taxes on your earned income statement. Well, you got to learn the tax strategies on how to deduct a large portion of that earned income. And of course, we teach that. So these are what I found to be the 12 wealth strategies, the quickest way to create wealth if you're a chiropractor.